Can I just say you are turning more and more into Nicholas Parsons as each edition goes past? Nicholas Parsons, 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 Nicholas Parsons.
You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact. Thank you. Hello, my name is Andrew Moyer, and as the minuet waltz fades away, once more it's my great pleasure to welcome our many listeners, not just in this country, but around the galaxy. And to welcome to the programme two talented, exciting, clever, original, witty, erudite performers who are going to show off their knowledge of Star Trek, time, space and many continuums as they try to speak on a subject for 60 seconds that I give them, and they try to do that without hesitation, deviation or repetition. And they are seated on my left, James Kluske, and seated on my right, Alex Newsom. Please welcome all two of them. Beside me sits Maurice Hurley, who's going to help me keep score and blow his whistle delicately when the 60 seconds have elapsed. And this particular edition of First Contact is coming from the 10 Forward Theatre in the heart of the Enterprise 1701D. And we begin this show this week with James Kluske. Who better? James, would you like to try and talk on this subject? A synopsis for Time Squared. 60 seconds, starting now.
The Enterprise detects a Federation shuttle floating in deep space, without any mothership to be found in the region. After bringing it on board, they find an unconscious Captain Picard. But how can this be? Picard is already on the ship.
Interruption from Alex?
Repetition of Picard.
The newcomer to Star Trek The Next Generation, interrupting the great veteran who has entertained us with his knowledge and stories and erudite anecdotes over the years that we've played this game that we love so much. The interruption was for repetition. I'm not sure I heard it that time, Alex, so benefit of the doubt to James, and if I can redress the balance later on, I shall be sure to do that. James, if you'd like to continue with 48 seconds remaining. A synopsis for Time Squared, starting now.
Upon studying the logs, the crew discover that the ship is from the future, and they see the destruction of the Enterprise in 6 hours. The crew decide to let events play out and discover a wibbly thing in space. Then Picard kills his clone to change the course of events, and to be honest, I'm not sure what happens, but they get out of it okay in the end. It's all a bit weird and vague.
Whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains that extra point. That just leaves me to say thank you to these two fine, intrepid, articulate, erudite, witty, smart, intelligent, well-dressed players of the game. I'd like to thank Maurice Hurley and Kurt Michael Bensmiller for writing this fine episode. Thank you to Joseph L. Scanlon, our director for this show, which first aired on the 3rd of April 1989. We are indebted to Gene Roddenberry, who created this amazing show. It just leaves me to ask, Alex, what did you think of this episode?
Well, there's so many things in life that have disappointing third parts. You might order a cooked breakfast and you get sausage, yes, egg, yes, and sauté potatoes. No one wants that. You want chips. Godfather 1, yes. Godfather 2, yes. Godfather 3, And this episode is much like that. It's great. Oh, that's a shame.
Start at the beginning. We're in Riker's apartment where I bet there isn't a single clean surface. And he is whipping up some eggs for everybody.
I'm glad you didn't say that he's making an omelette, because he isn't making an omelette. He's making scrambled eggs. That is in no way an omelette. That is no omelette I have ever seen in my life. The only time I've seen an omelette that looks like that is when I f***ed up making an omelette. That is not an omelette.
I quite like these scenes. I do like seeing them off duty and doing stuff that's not necessarily related to the main plot. And then main plot, there's a shuttle. I can't help but feel, actually, the end of teaser should have been the reveal it's Picard in the shuttle, because that's a good cliffhanger to go into the credits with. But no, it's more, we found a shuttle. Fine, that's alright.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It would make more sense, but it would make it too long an opening.
But we do get that great moment in the opening, all worth it. We'll be in tractor beam range in 2 seconds. Now, Data, is that vital information? Might that be a little bit redundant? In the time it took you to say that, could you not have pressed the button activating the tractor beam and just bringing it on board? Or did the writer have like, oh man, we've got 10 seconds to fill, can we do something about the tractor beam?
Data, wasn't that slightly redundant? I just like to keep you all updated on my activities. God. Pricks.
Incidentally, why did Riker serve Data some of his eggs?
I mean, you get great opportunity here to see the different reactions of all the crew to something disgusting. Geordi puts it in the mouth and goes, ew, as does Pulaski. Worf, ha, because he's from a different culture. He thinks they're delicious.
To be fair, he does eat worms.
I thought it was next week that we find out Pulaski's put something unpleasant in her mouth.
Also, in that scene, Riker mentions he knows how to cook because he had to cook because his father didn't do anything. Oh, golly, I wonder if that'll come up at any point soon. Probably not.
Yeah, it's Next Generation. One episode never leads into the next one.
Can I just say as well how glad I am that they didn't do what they sometimes do with these unrelated openings, which is have it come back right at the end. Well, we don't understand what happened here, but I think it's been a pretty harrowing experience for all of us. But anyway, omelettes! The whole experience has made them richer human beings, and Riker's able to cook a reasonable omelette. Not a good one, just, an average one.
What if it turns out in the end that all this problems with time dilation or what have you has been caused by Riker's omelette? Because, of course, there is an episode of Voyager where it turns out some cheese was the problem. So I think an episode where the omelette was the problem is actually a slight improvement.
So they find Picard on a shuttle, bring him on board, and when you saw him, were you shocked and stunned? Did you go, oh, it's another Captain Picard, what could this possibly be? What did you think of this general premise?
You know what, for whatever we can joke about it, it's actually really good. Apart from the fact that time is flagged up in the title, if you don't have that, it's actually quite intriguing. Why is he there? Even with the time thing, what's happened? It is genuinely quite interesting, and they build it up gradually. They have the different elements. It's done really well. The whole thing of he's seen the Enterprise explode, but why did he leave the ship? Each little bit that adds up makes it really intriguing. And that's why it's so disappointing so much later. But we'll come to that.
It does have all the elements of a procedural. It's laid out all the clues. It seems like there is an actual mystery to solve. One of the clues on the shuttle when they're examining on the pod, that looks like the damage caused by an antimatter explosion. Does it? Does some slight scuffing look like the damage from an antimatter explosion? Look, I'm fine for you to learn that the shuttle's been affected by an antimatter explosion, but you could have scanned it and found some kind of residue or residual, or even got it from the scanners. But the shuttle, everything's backwards. You turn down things to turn stuff up. It's all gone wrong with the shuttle. Something, again, which is just never picked up upon, that yeah, the shuttle's broken and not working, and we can only fix it by doing the opposite of what we expect, but for no reason. No explanation is given why the shuttle works when you do backward stuff to it.
But before we get to them fixing the shuttle, there's something that happens in this episode twice. They call Geordi in engineering, and they do it in this first scene when they first find Picard, and they do it later in the episode when the weird phenomenon turns up. And each time they call him, he's just standing randomly in front of the warp core.
It's almost as if those two scenes were shot at exactly the same time. Oh, let's not use engineering as a setting anyway. Let's just get Geordi to come to places. I mean, we call the chief engineer, essentially, to hook up a battery to the shuttle. No one else can do this. Let's not get any kind of just general tech guy. We need the chief engineer to power up this shuttle.
But it's just the fact that they call him, and each time he's standing just in front of the wall, as if he was just waiting for somebody to contact him. He wasn't actually doing any work. He was just standing there.
Got to get the money on screen. Joking aside, I think it is just worth restating, because we're going to tear it down fairly soon. This section, this is great. And Patrick Stewart is fantastic.
Also, we have a staff meeting, they discuss possibilities. They mention Slingshot. They are embracing Star Trek's mythology. They are acknowledging it, an in-joke for fans. It's good. Everything up to this point is looking good. I'm enjoying it. The footage they actually managed to get off the shuttle is all a bit grainy, it's a bit blurry. Looks intriguing, some cool special effects shot in there. The Enterprise exploding. Everyone likes the lead ship exploding. You could almost do this as a big two-parter in some ways. It seems there is a mystery to be solved. There's something interesting. And good tension. The Picard duplicate slowly becoming more aware, and you're getting more clues from him. What could he possibly be revealing?
It is the single best mystery that they've done so far. They've had episodes with a mystery element, but they've never really been that mysterious, have they? This is actually, yeah, it's really well done.
But there wasn't much mystery as to who he was. I mean, Troy, who was actually vaguely useful here, she says that second Picard is still Picard.
I think once you reach a certain point, though, you have accepted that it is Captain Picard, and there has been some kind of time travel problem that's taken place, and will they be able to solve it? Will they be able to change their fate in some ways? I don't think there's any mystery as to that. It's just the mystery of what happened to the Enterprise, and can they possibly avoid it happening once again, or will they get stuck in some kind of weird time loop?
Actually, I think that's where the way the mystery's written in this episode is pretty good. It's pretty effective, because the best mysteries always work on the basis that as you solve one part of the mystery, it just opens up further questions. So in this case, is it Picard? Yes, it is Picard. And he left the ship. Well, why did he leave the ship? It was exploding. Why is it exploding? It building. That's what it needs to do, and that's what previous episodes with mysteries haven't done. They've had a mystery at the start, and it's just carried on until the point that the audience goes, well, yeah, this is obviously what's happened. The problem in this episode is the audience is right up to the end is going, yeah, what? And they don't tell you. It's like having an episode of Poirot where he gathers everyone round at the end to reveal who's committed the murder, and then goes, well, I think we can conclude one thing. He definitely died. Well, thanks a bunch.
And of course as well, actually, good writing, credit to Maurice Hurley. He does hook it onto a character. What is the one thing Picard wouldn't do is he would not leave his ship. He would definitely go down with the rest of his crew. He would be the last man there. He's not the coward to leave it to explode. So that's interesting as well. But that's totally unexplored. You don't ever really get any glimpse into what might have happened in the original time loop, or indeed if it was an original time loop, because they found this anomaly, a big vortex in space. Stunning special effect. Really great. They find this anomaly in space. There's an anomaly in space. What do we do with anomalies in space? We explore them, but does anyone have any thoughts on the anomalies in space? This is where it seems to go wrong for me, when they find this anomaly in space, this weird space anomaly that's sucking them in, but it seems to have some kind of power or force behind it, some kind of rational thought. But what's going on with this?
I think you're fairly right there that you can pinpoint it to an exact moment. And it's that moment when they suddenly go, the anomaly, it's just appeared out of nowhere. Right. Okay. That's pretty bloody convenient, isn't it? And from then on, it's sort of... That's pretty bloody convenient. Explanation? No? Okay, right. And it just stays that way for the rest of the episode.
The thing about that explanation is it completely throws away this being some sort of time loop. All it is them being sucked in once, Picard leaving the ship, and then being thrown back in time so that he doesn't leave the ship. That's all it is. It's not a time loop, it's just one thing happening. And there is such a better ending there. They could have had it so that the future Picard kills the past Picard instead of the other way around.
I mean, that, actually, as a moment, is quite shocking. That's a brilliant bit of telly. It's a shame it takes place in a completely nonsensical kind of space. Like, it's almost like, oh, anything goes, Picard's going to shoot Picard, it's a nice visual. And you just think, what? Why? It boils down to him really wanting to leave the ship. And there were two choices in the original timeline he could have made. Does he leave the ship, or does he do something else? That's rubbish. That is just bad storytelling. Because even if there are two choices in any given situation, particularly one where you're being sucked into some kind of weird space vortex, it doesn't necessarily follow that just because there are two options, that one of them is necessarily right. Leaving on your own, everyone dies. Flying into the middle, everyone could still die. This quandary Picard has put in front of him is either to do one thing or do another, both of which might be wrong, and he's just basically guessing.
I know I've only watched it the once, but I don't really understand any of the ending. So, Picard is sent back after he's left the ship to try and buy them time, and then when he leaves the ship, it's destroyed, he gets thrown back, he ends up on the ship. So is there a time loop at play as they're discussing?
No, that's what I was saying. There is no time loop. All that happens is the ship explodes, Picard leaves and gets thrown back in time, and then he is shot by Picard. Picard is convinced to stay on board, and that's it.
Which, okay, so I did take it the right way. In which case, there is no cycle to break, and Picard has murdered a version of himself for no particularly good reason.
Well, presumably, I mean, we saw the corpse and the shuttlecraft kind of be deleted from time when they changed time. So they'd have disappeared anyway. So I don't think we can consider it murder. Or temporary murder, maybe.
But it is I mean, it is still...
In cold blood.
But no, to be fair, the one memory I had of this episode was Picard shooting himself. It is the big moment of the episode, and it's a memorable moment, I'll give it that. It's just, I remembered it being the other way around, because I remembered it as, oh, this is a time loop, and it's his future version shooting the past version to break the loop. Which I thought would have been much better, rather than it's some weird space alien.
Did he really need to kill him, though? Could he not have just stunned him?
Well, yeah. I mean, does he... Well, he doesn't stun him, does he? Because Pulaski... Well, Pulaski is a bit inept, so maybe he was just stunned. I'm going by that, because she's inept throughout the episode. I mean, Picard is there looking like a corpse, and she says the readings of his brainwaves are very strange. And then she says his brainwaves are just out of phase. Which is just incoherent babble.
I like that, though. I think it's an interesting element. I mean, if he did come back and he was just fine and was able to articulate it, I suppose in some ways you might say he's almost shell-shocked or he's got post-traumatic stress. You could maybe have played with that, but actually that he can't reveal the mystery, that he is remaining impenetrable in some ways, that's quite useful in setting up and building the tension.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that. It's just Pulaski seems completely inept in diagnosing him.
I think the problem is it's badly explained because they use that description of he's got to wait for his body clock to realign, like he's suffering from jet lag, and it's just such a bad way to explain what's going on, and it confuses the issue.
I know, I felt like that when I went to Times Square.
The shame of all of this, getting back to the anomaly for a second, is that if you took the anomaly out and you played up on that thing of future Picard shooting past Picard, but although even then that's not essential, to be honest, it's a better episode without the anomaly, without some kind of sentient anomaly, when it's just about the crew and the present crew fighting against something that's happened in the future that they seem destined towards. That is far more interesting.
Now, in that final sequence, right after Picard has shot himself, for some reason, Chief O'Brien just walks in to the shuttle bay. Can anyone explain to me just why Chief O'Brien turns up to like Geordi in engineering, just stand in the shuttle bay and watch something?
Yes, it's equally strange maybe to call Pulaski. I've just shot a man and killed him. I need a doctor. To do what? What you need is a mortuary.
They don't have a mortuary on the Enterprise, do they? They just kind of have sick bay and they kind of put people under, like, a blanket.
They feed them to the puppies.
It's the circle of life.
But if the puppies get a taste for human flesh, won't they eat the children?
Well, as happens in season 6.
Oh yeah, the episode Rascals. That's a brilliant episode.
So, essentially, the ending, by deciding to warp straight into the anomaly that's sucking them in, it just disappears and it ends, and there's no explanation as to what it ever was, or what it was doing, or why it was there, or why doing that actually fixes it, and the problem that was there in the first place just disappears, and we're all left baffled as to what's happened and feeling completely unsatisfied.
That solution is hilarious, incidentally. Well, we'll stay and monitor it. Unless that was the mistake. That we stayed and we looked. Well, should we flee quickly in the opposite direction? No, let's go quickly farther into it. What? Yes, I think into the deathy thing. That's definitely the way to go. It's so disappointing because, to be honest with you, if that final third worked properly, this would probably be my favourite episode so far, by some considerable margin.
So what a shame. Any final words, James?
I think what a shame pretty much sums it up.
With that lack of satisfaction hanging over us, we move over to that space we call Quickfire.
Quickfire.
That ending left us feeling not so happy, but there was an original ending, and do you know who it might have involved, Alex?
Greta Garbo.
It wasn't Greta Garbo. In fact, this would have been a standalone episode still, but it would have led into the next episode featuring an old favourite, the character of Q. But Gene Roddenberry said, no, we're not going to do that, which kind of ruined the ending. This was all going to have been part of a big kind of Q plot.
These are the words of Maurice Hurley.
Why would going into the vortex center save you? It doesn't make sense, but it does if Q is pulling the strings.
Well, Maurice, I have to say this. I think that's lazy as well. I don't really want Q being omnipotent and doing that, because it just it gives you license to do anything at the end and not actually write a proper ending if you just say, it was Q all along, he was just testing us. Because I'm sure there's a satisfying resolution to be found there that doesn't involve omnipotence.
That is basically turning around and saying, and then God appeared. Can I also just say, I'm enjoying the way that each week Maurice Hurley's voice is is developing into something bizarre.
Actually, speaking about God randomly appearing at the end, they were actually producing Star Trek V when this was made. So there was an original ending to the episode, which would have involved them all going back to Riker's quarters, and Worf wanted another omelette, but he got an Alaskan stew instead.
Is that a true fact?
That is a true fact. That is absolutely true.
Really?
And it would have been a better ending than what we got, to be fair.
The original title to this episode was Time to the Second, which is a pun, because there's a second Picard and involves time. That might be a better title. I'm not sure.
It's definitely a better title.
I found it quite amusing when you have Pulaski phone out to the bridge and say, Captain Picard, your double, he seems to be coming round. He's making more sense. And when Picard gets down there, he's just writhing on a table, looking around like Stevie Wonder at a gig.
The scene where Riker is going, NCC 1701D Shuttle 5, looks over, NCC 1701D Shuttle 5. Hey, these two things are the same. There was no way to visually show that to the viewer. We had to say it out loud. The Traveller gets a mention, Wesley's special mentor and friend. That's nice. As does Maddox.
Does he?
Wait, he mentions Mannheim's experiments from We'll Always Have Paris as well. It's a continuity fest, this episode.
That's got to be the worst kind of festival, hasn't it?
Well, that rounds up another Maurice Hurley masterpiece. We will be back again with the Icarus Factor, but for now, goodbye.
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 Before we get to that, how is it a pun?
On Times Square, in New York, the place.
But what does that have to do with this episode?
Well, that people know the thing called Times Square. Just like they know the phrase Yoo-hoo for Q-hoo, which has nothing to do with that episode.
But it's not a pun if it has no relation to the thing it's meant to be a pun on.
But it does.
It doesn't. They don't go onto the holodeck and go onto Times Square.
But it sounds like a thing. So they're definitely punning.
And just because there's two Picards does not make it squared.
The fact that they use time in the title spoils the mystery for me, because it's a time travel plot. And so, is it a clone? Is it a ghost? Is it some weird space alien? No, it's time, because it says time in the title. Time squared, time's coming back again, time's doing it again, and they're probably going to visit New York and see those big screens like in all the superhero movies. That's what that episode title says to me.
And do you want to know what's really bad about it? They're calling it Times Squared because there's two Picards. And they do this again in 2 other episodes of Star Trek. There are 2 other episodes which have squared in it because there's 2 of this thing. There's an episode called Q Squared. There's an episode called I think it was called Enterprise Squared or E Squared. They do it 2 more times, even though it doesn't work.
And it's a blatant rip-off of Red Dwarf.
It didn't work then either.
I for years, from my childhood, thought the episode was called Me Too. Dwarf Confessions.
That's a very, very niche porn site.